Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the No Closer Show. As always, Scott Carson, your host. Excited to be here with you today. Today, I want to do a little bit of talking. Obviously, it's we're the first part of September, but what's really in the news right now is everything going on with Hurricane Dorian. Obviously, it's a Category 5 hurricane. It's over, as we record this, is over Bahamas, a few miles off the coast of Florida. It could stay over the Bahamas. It could move up the coast. First and foremost, our thoughts and prayers go out with the families of people that are there, that have had to evacuate, friends and family of those that have family in the neck of the woods. Our thoughts and prayers go out to. I mean, it was just a couple of years ago, we had Hurricane Harvey hit here in Texas. Obviously hit the Gulf Coast where I grew up from, and then obviously hit Houston and caused over $125 billion in damage. And it's estimated that Dorian's going to see at least that amount, if not more. Maybe challenge Hurricane Katrina for over $160 billion. For a couple of reasons. One, I would say Harvey would have caused more devastation if it hit a little higher valued area. Not saying I was wishing for that, not at all means. But the South Coast, Southwest, Gulf Coast part of Texas, property values are less than they are in Houston or in other areas of the country. So I think you have to look at how many people were impacted more so than you look at the amount of damage that was caused, because that can vary depending on what happens in specific areas of the country. But anyway, what I wanted to have this episode talk about a little bit today is if we look back at what happened with Harvey and then the subsequent dominoes that kind of fell in the industry, what can you expect? Well, first and foremost, let's just talk about there's obviously going to be some damage. When you've got 120, 180, 200 mile per hour winds, stuff is just not built to, stand up to that for long term. You look at some of the early photos coming out of the Bahamas, there's been some damage. We're going to see that damage. One of the things that comes to mind more than anything else was when Hurricane Andrew hit in Florida a few years back. Quite a few years ago now, about 15, 18 years ago. What caused, you look at some of the photos and the devastation as it rolled across Florida. I was working for Palm Harbor Homes for a brief stint, about 120 days actually, and they used photos from that devastation to help sell their homes there, because there was a mobile home park that was hit and everything was destroyed except for the one Palm Harbor home that was built there. It was built like a traditional home, but then a rickety mobile home, which you often think are modular homes. So are we going to see some of that? I think we're going to see some bad areas, and it all depends on what happens with hurricane. Does it come ashore, full brunt there? Does it hit Cape Canaveral? Does it go up to Jacksonville? Does it stay a little bit further south and come across through like West Palm Beach and that neck of the woods? Martin counties. Being that I invest heavily, or I have invested heavily in Florida the last couple of years, I know those areas all too well. And fortunately, we've been able to divest most of our investments over the past couple of years, or the stuff that we own is not on the water anymore, because that's where it's going to be hit the worst. You're going to have wind damages, you're going to have storm surge, and then you're going to have a lot like happened in Houston with the flooding. And that was the biggest thing that happened 2 years ago. It was a lot of devastation from the rain and the flooding. Lower places got washed or flooded. We had some more students that dealt with some of that stuff. I can think back to actually when I was in college and seeing the power of what water happens. I worked at a restaurant south of Austin, north of San Antonio, called the Gristmill, in an area called New Braunfels in Comal County, right on the rivers of the Guadalupe. And they would always say, a 100-year flood with rainfall. Well, 100-year flood could happen every year. As we are seeing, 100-year hurricanes can happen almost every year too, right, everybody? And so I've seen buildings washed away. I've seen just what rain can do. And rain is one of the most powerful factors out there, especially if it's got no place to go, because it builds up, and then it runs. And that's one of the biggest things that we saw happening in Houston, is that areas that had never been flooded before had 3-4 feet of water inside of them, and people weren't expecting that. And we've seen some of our friends who have also, lived in Florida. They're on the second floor. They're putting sandbags around their doors. They're putting They're trying to waterproof and caulk up their doors and windows and things like that, even on the second floor, based on just the pure power of the rain coming in sideways, storms, storms and things like that. Who knows what the flooding is going to do? So that's the thing to keep in mind is, look, first and foremost, be careful, get the heck out of there. If you've got people that have escaped or, evacuated. My mom still lives in Aransas Pass, Texas, and went through the hurricane 2 years ago by getting out and evacuating north to just south of San Antonio. And fortunate for her house only had to have the roof replaced and some things done, but fortunately for them, most of the house was okay. Unlike a lot of other neighbors that their houses were destroyed completely. The thing you got to look at when you have 150 plus greater or higher winds, it's like a sandblaster. And that's the one back of her house, one side of her house looks like it was sandblasted from the wind and the rain coming through. And so I expect to see that with a lot of the images we're seeing from South Florida, especially when you start looking at condos and things like that in the water. You're going to see a lot of devastation, a lot of windows broken, a lot of interior stuff. So that's what, obviously, we know that's going to happen. But what does that mean? Well, for the last couple of years, when the hurricanes come through, the areas part of especially the last 12, 24 months, the areas of the country that have been devastated the most by hurricanes have also led the country in default and foreclosure rates. Harris County has one of the highest foreclosure rates in the country, and also Florida. Texas itself has not been such a high foreclosure rate, but Harris County and the Gulf Coast areas where the hurricane came through for 2 years is still seeing a higher foreclosure rate. Obviously, default rate kicks in, and Florida's been one of the higher states for foreclosures because of the hurricanes coming through there. Not just because of the major ones, but also you have smaller hurricanes that cause damage to go through there. So that's what we're going to see. Now, what's going to happen immediately? Well, we know devastation. You're going to have water. You're going to have, buildings that need to be torn down. Roofs are going to be gone. There's going to be an increased cost of supplies because supplies will be at a higher priority. They'll have high demand, often a little slow getting in the supplies, depending on what's going on. So that's what you're going to see happen for the most part of this area. And we're still afraid of the hurricane when I'm recording this. Happy Labor Day, everybody. For those that are listening, you're probably listening to this to the day after Labor Day or later in the weekend before or later, a week or two after everything happens. So let's talk about a couple things here. Like I said before, you got to expect the devastation. What's going to happen is foreclosure. Well, what's going to happen immediately is banks, hedge funds in those areas, or real estate investment funds that have mortgages in those areas, they're going to do the right thing. Most of them should be doing the right thing and not sit there and go after the borrowers who now have a damaged house or have suffered a travesty or their jobs have been lost. They're often going to give the homeowners 6 to 12 months to get back on their feet. They're going to give them some time. They're going to say, okay, let's work with you. Let's work with the insurance companies. Let's see what's going to take place and what's going to happen. All right. That's a good thing. So that's people, I've had people reach out to me, oh my gosh, Florida may be on sale again. I'm like, well, let's just relax here for a second. First and foremost, you never want to wish that on somebody. But Florida's faced enough hurricanes in the past anyway, over the years, that you should also always expect stuff like that to happen. I mean, if you're living on the coast in Florida, you have to, one, understand this is going to be a way of life. This is what's going to happen. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the storms are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I know that's because of global warming. We have more moisture in the air, more water out there from the ice caps melting. I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist, okay, or a scientist. But I think we're seeing progression, Category 4, Category 5, maybe Category 6 they were talking about is possibly happening. So you're within, 50 miles of the coast. You have to expect the devastation of the high winds, the rain, and flooding. And it's got to become a way of life. You have to expect that living on the coast in Florida, or even really in Texas or any South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina. You can see the governors now are also recommending evacuation for those lying areas. Even though the hurricane may be 2-3 days away, they're trying to prepare to keep mass panic taking place. And so that's the thing you look at. Wherever this hurricane hits, wherever it goes, you're going to see increase in default. It's just going to happen. Doesn't mean you can jump on board, start calling banks immediately to start buying that debt, because the banks know that, hey, they wait around a little bit and work with the borrowers. They don't want to be the bad guys. Like, oh, we foreclosed on everybody that lost their house. They don't want that PR nightmare. Okay, they're not going to do that. They're going to wait for the insurance company to come in to stroke a check to help them either A, get paid off in full, or go from there. Now, you're still going to have a fair share of properties where the borrowers just walk away. A house is demolished or house trashed. I mean, just look at what happened in New Orleans years ago with the New Orleans flood. You had empty properties for a couple of years. All right, the Gulf zone, that was in place coming in and provided benefits to investors to come in and rebuild those houses and go from there. Will we see that? I don't think we'll see that necessarily so in Florida, just because of the real estate, the high-end real estate aspect of that. But you'll probably see that in some areas of Florida, Georgia, maybe the lower economic areas where people don't have the extra money, where they move and maybe never come back, like happened in New Orleans. You don't know, but you've got to expect that. So things as a note and a real estate investor to keep in mind is, if you own property in the neck of the woods, you better have your insurance taken care of, insurance paid up to date, because that's going to be one thing that's going to be costly to invest in areas that are hit repeatedly like Florida, is your insurance costs. And you got to make sure that your coverage with wind and damage and rain and all that stuff, that you got those riders or coverage on there, because that alone can, I hate to say, ruin a deal when you're looking at it. If you can pick up something non-performing, or pick up something that's you're taking over distressed assets in 12 or 18 months from now, because that's the thing to look at. Your foreclosure rates have still been a little higher in those areas. They're going to tick up a little bit, but they're not going to be immediately, oh, hey, you start seeing foreclosures skyrocket there now, because like I said before, the banks are not going to do something to start foreclosing. They're going to give the borrowers time, 6-12 months before they start the foreclosure process, start sending out notice of defaults. Now, the thing is, when you look at the states of like Florida and South Carolina, I'm separating those from Georgia and North Carolina, because South Carolina and Florida are both judicial states. So you have a longer foreclosure time frame, let alone in those states. 9 to 12 months to foreclose. It used to be over 2 years, at one point over a decade again in Florida, but the online foreclosure and then the court systems have really expedited to get that stuff done over the last 10 years. So it's not nearly as dramatic as it used to, or as long as it used to be, but it's still a longer time frame than, say, Georgia, which has basically a 60 to 90-day foreclosure time frame. It's the second fastest in the nation compared to Texas. So that's the thing to look at. I mean, one thing in Georgia that's going to slow you down a little bit is how the state wants you to be a licensed mortgage broker in Georgia if you're going to be buying debt outside of your self-directed IRA. That's the one get out of jail clause. If you use your self-directed IRA to fund the deal, you don't have to have it. It doesn't have to be a licensed mortgage broker. Everything else does there in Georgia. Now, North Carolina, a relatively faster foreclosure state anyway. You're going to have basically everything from the coast, and who knows how far the hurricane goes up the coast or what ends up happening. But you can start identifying those states. If you invest in those states, start marking, start looking at stuff, start tracking stuff, and start making, marking your calendars for 6 months to 9 months to 12 months to start reaching out to banks that are in those areas, that lend in those areas. And start reaching out, because you can probably pick up some assets that are relatively inexpensive because they either have been damaged because of the hurricane, or they've been paid off because of the hurricane. So you've got somebody that's willing to walk away. Banks will often look to move a portfolio or two in specific areas to get off their books. Depends on what their the default rate is in those areas. So that's the thing to keep in mind. First and foremost, like I said before, our thoughts, our prayers go out to those that are being affected by this, who are going to be affected by this, in a variety of reasons. Not just those that are in those areas, but those that have evacuated other areas. I think of what happened in Houston a few years ago when New Orleans was hit, and now Houston and Austin and San Antonio were affected with everybody moving here. We had, FEMA stepped in, provided temporary housing, took over apartment complexes. You're going to see, that's the thing, if you look in the areas around maybe 2-3 hours away from the hardest hit areas of this hurricane area, that's the area that's going to be impacted faster than anything else. And what do I mean by that, by faster than anything else? Well, those are the areas that here over the next 6 months, next 12 months, you're going to see an increase in occupancy. You're going to see people that, hey, evacuated, staying with friends, family, they're doing temporary rentals. You're probably going to see an increased cost in Airbnbs, short-term rentals. Your vacancy rates will go down as people are staying there longer. I've already had people reach out to me this morning who lived in Florida, but they've moved to Ohio temporarily, or they're out of they're out of Jacksonville, or they're out of West Palm Beach, and they're not moving back for a while. They're going to give it a month or two before they end up heading back home on a full-time basis, because there just won't be a place for them to stay. And that's the thing too. When we had stuff that happened here on the Gulf Coast in Texas, it hit the eye of the storm went over Aransas Pass, Texas. That's where I grew up. Basically, the eye of the storm went over my Ingleside and Aransas Pass, where I grew up. Basically, my old home, where my parents raised us. You could go down and help, but there's really no place for you to stay unless you got a travel trailer, and then you're still going to need your own electricity and your own gas, because things were just devastated. So that's the thing to keep in mind, is if you're an investor and you've got properties in those areas, hey, first and foremost, like I said, I hope your insurance is doing well. I hope you paid up your insurance, got the extra insurance there. But you're probably going to want to take a look at areas that are being affected where people are moving to. So that's the thing I would be doing, is looking at your maps of your assets. If you got stuff across the country, or you're in a market, look at stuff that's basically 2 hours, especially an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours away from where a lot of that devastation is going to hit along the coastline. And that's where you're going to see the first impact in the first 30 days. Actually, the first week, you're already seeing impact in those areas now, where people are coming in, temporarily staying in hotels and with family and friends like that, and Airbnb. You're seeing an increase in that spike up. But hopefully, we're not seeing people that are price gouging, which happens quite a bit. We've seen it happen in some resorts. People have been going to, we've seen people like, hey, I live on the coastline, I'm going to Orlando, I'm going to go ride it out at the resorts. And seeing the increase in costs going up on the rooms because of their being nearly booked. So it becomes supply and demand. All right. There's a lot of demand, but less supply. The cost is going to go up. I don't consider that necessarily price gouging. You're not charging $80 for a sheet of plywood, or $100 for a sheet of plywood, like what's happening before some of these hurricanes in the past. But it still there's opportunities, but you also have to keep in mind, hey, what's going to happen? Well, people are going to lose their jobs. People are going to not be able to work because their job back home is gone, or it's completely shut down, or simply unexpected, stuff like that. So this is where I think we are going to see more issues more than anything else, not just the housing, not just the insurance. We're going to see the default rates increase because of the hurricanes, yes, but you're also going to see it in people that are staying somewhere right now. They don't have money long-term. They don't have savings. 10% of America is already 1 month behind in their mortgage payment. 85% of Americans are missed paycheck away from being in default. So this is what you have to look at. Those different economic issues of what's going to happen. Yes, it's going to take money to come in and repair. A lot of people are doing in Houston. People are just showing up to Houston with razor blade cutters and just going door to door and helping people, taking basically where the water level came in at 4 foot or less or whatever, and just running a razor blade there, cutting that sheetrock, ripping that sheetrock out, and taking out, and everything else that's been damaged or waterlogged. You got to get that out of the house within the first 2 to 3 days. Otherwise, you're going to have some dramatic mold sitting in, and that's never a good thing. So it's going to take a little while for those houses, the housing markets in these areas that are hit, also recover, because people are not going to want to buy in those areas immediately. But what's a beautiful thing is when investors do come in, they'll pick those things up. They'll buy those things, and because they know they'll put the work in, and they're, especially if they're willing to hold on to that as part of their models, holding on to the assets for 12, 24, 36 months. It's an opportunity to come in, pick up those assets at a cheaper price, and hold on to them while the market rebounds or recovers. I don't think it's a quick fix and flip market for the most part. I think it's more of a buy and then hold on the assets for an extended period of time. And that's why it's important. Like I said, start looking at what's going on in those markets. Start understanding, hey, if you're a landlord and your property survived okay, great. You should not have a vacancy factor. You should be able to rent that property out. Maybe even a little bit of a premium, because I wouldn't say like doubling the rent, but at least a premium because of supply and demand, or lack of demand more than anything, or lack of inventory more than anything else, especially in a lot of areas. Like here in Austin, it's, vacancy factor is really low because we have so many people moving to the area and we have a shortage of new homes being built. So like we're 3 hours away from the coast. San Antonio's 2 hours away from the coast. If something were to hit the Gulf Coast again, you're going to see some impact. We get some rain, we get some wind. Occasionally we'll get a tornado that's 2-3 hours out from it, but it's not the same thing as it's bearing the brunt of the force of those 150 plus mile per hour winds. Now, I will tell you a story. I grew up in South Texas. I actually worked down in Port Aransas on the coast, worked for Royal Caribbean condos there. And what's funny is most of those large buildings that are built, the large condos, they have a wind factor of about 100 miles an hour. There's not much holding them up. You've got some rebarb, you've got an exterior paint, stucco, that's really on a sheetrock, or not sheetrock, a styrofoam exterior for the most part, harder stuff. So you would see spots, it was just sheetrock. Like, what is this? This is just foam board underneath the here. It's not styrofoam, but pretty much is. And so that's the thing you keep in mind. You realize they've got insurances on the high rises, the condos too. Part of the reason I've loved condos in the past, especially on the Gulf Coast, because it's pretty easy to fix. You can go in, if you've got some water damage, clean everything out relatively quickly and replace it and be up and rock and rolling in 30 days or less, depending on the situation in the unit. But your insurance costs are going to be higher. We've got some friends that have bought some property that have been hit by those areas. They were excited because they were getting the asset at a discount, but the insurance costs have really removed most, if not all, the profits from it, because they've been had to hold on to the asset for a while, and they're carrying these costs on investment property. So that's the thing to keep in mind. You've got friends and family in those areas, hey, reach out to them, realize something's going to happen. I know everybody likes to stress out about this thing. Oh my gosh, look, the banks are not going to sit here and start the foreclosure process if you're in an area. If you've been affected by the hurricane, they're going to, they're going to get a bailout by the government of some sort of insurance. They're going to be, hey, let's wait a few months, 6 months at least, see where it's at. If you're in the heavy devastation areas, they're not going to sit there and, let's be an evil bank. They're going to work with you. So the best thing you can do is, if you've got friends and families in the area, it's just like I said, besides praying for them, make sure to reach out to them and say, hey, you may want to look into this. You may, depending on who your bank is, reach out to them, let them know immediately that, hey, you're in an area that was hit hard, and they'll be able to see that by the insurance numbers and everything going on. And then also, hey, your job or your employment was affected. It is affected. Okay. Now, if you are a tradesman, that's the thing to keep out. If you got friends that are in tradesmen, there will be plenty of work in these areas, repair, rehabs. They're being financed by banks, by insurance companies and things like that to go in. So that's the thing, is that your jobs, we've seen this happen before. We see this happen all in Texas, especially with during the summers when we have these horrible thunderstorms come through. Roofing companies are going all over the place, especially if a tornado hits an area or hail goes through an area, boom, you'll see an area flooded with roofing companies coming through to give bids, to get insurance checks, to go to work and make that stuff happen. And you're going to see that happening throughout Florida there. So one of the things you also want to keep in mind, all right, make sure the animals and stuff that are taken care of. I was seeing somewhere in Georgia and South Carolina, they've got a bunch of animals already up for adoption that have been evacuated. They're looking for homes because of they've just, they're sitting there in these areas. They're going to be hit, and then these shelters are looking to move these animals out before the hurricane hits, because they're going to be with a limited staff and be able to take care of things. The same thing. They're going to run into power being out, water being out, storm surges, things like that they got to be taken care of. So best thing I can tell you to do, guys, is if you're in an area like that, like I said, hey, our thoughts and prayers go out for you for your evacuation. We wish you the best. If we can help anyway, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. But also, hey, keep an eye out. If you've got property within 2 hours of those areas, you're going to see an influx. You're going to see some opportunity if you need to. Those looking to invest back in Florida and other parts that are hit there, you're not going to see a rush of the bank selling notes off in those areas. They're going to wait a good 6 to 12 months to see if they can get paid off in full. And then you're going to start seeing the opportunities to start hitting as you start seeing, depending on what happens to the area and how heavy the damage is or how little the damage is in an area, some opportunity there. So keep that in mind. One of the things you can look at too is you talk to the zoning departments, so code enforcement here in the next few months. You're going to see, especially in specific areas you like, oftentimes those code enforcement guys and gals are the best eyes and ears in specific cities. So oftentimes they can provide you a list of properties that have been hit in areas, and that may be a list for you to target as far as the banks that are on those lists. So doing some research, tracking down the smaller banks. You're not going to call Bank of America, Chase, Citibank, Wells Fargo to buy their debt, but you're going to see smaller banks that don't have quite the reserves that might be willing to sell the debt off on some of those homes in the next 6 months. I wouldn't jump on it here now. I would wait, like I said, 3-6 months before you start reaching out to those banks to see if there's a way for you to step in, become the bank, buy that debt at a discount, and then negotiate something with the homeowner. If either they're still in the house, try to get them back up on their feet. If they're not in the house, then hey, cash your keys, deed in lieu. But you always want to make sure and put eyes on those assets. That's going to be the most important thing. Is you may be buying a house, be buying a note on a house, but all that you've gotten is a slab or a shell or half a house that's been blown away or torn down. So be careful out there, everybody. Like I said, we wish for the best. It would be great if the hurricane just kind of bounced off the coast and went back out in the Gulf and just dissipated. I don't think the weathermen foresee that happening. I don't think they're going to see that happen. So that's what you got to keep that in mind. Is it's going to be a little bit more expensive if you're a renter in the Orlando market. You'd expect that to go up if you're already living there. That's the one thing that people don't think about. I've got some friends that are renting in Orlando. Hey, hopefully you've got your lease in for another 6 to 12 months, because it would not be surprised if your landlord bumps the rent up when your lease is up in the next couple months. And I'm not talking by $50 to $100. It may be by $200, $300, depending on what happens in the market. So be preparing, be working, be ready to rock and roll. That also leads to an increase in money coming into those markets 2-3 hours, more restaurants, fast food, entertainment. As people are living there, grocery stores, things like that, you're going to see a lot of basic stuff that'll probably, necessities, be a little higher priced than they have been before, because there's been a increase in need in those areas. Somebody made a joke that people in Orlando going to get water looked like something from Mad Max a couple of days ago, which we've seen that happen. Was it 2 years ago, we saw, even here in Austin, 3 hours from the coast, we saw areas ran out of gas as people were getting all extreme. And I was like, okay, Austin, we're going to get some rain. It's a little bit of wind. We're not going to see the dramatic effects of a hurricane. We're 3 hours away. No reason to panic. Yes, it's good if you've got extra stuff at your house in case something happens, but let's not be dramatic and cause a riot, chaos in specific areas, because you need to get your extra 6-pack or 12-pack of water out there. So once again, Dorian destruction, we wish everybody best. Prayers go out to them. If you're interested in the note business and stuff like that, you're going to see some defaults in there, but it's going to be 6 to 12 months before anything happens. You're going to see an increase in cost of housing there, increase of cost of supplies. Insurance costs are going to go up dramatically, as we already know that they've already done that there. Some people will leave and never come back. Others will just rebuild again and will absorb the cost, realize it's something that happens when you live in Florida. You have to expect that. You're going to get hit by hurricanes. And that's the thing that's great about news and meteorology. Somebody's coming to have. It's not like just showing up instantly and no alert. Luckily, the death toll decreases usually dramatically because we have such great news and weather and radar and things like that these days compared to what it was a century ago, even 50, 60 years ago, things out there. So anyway, once again, please be safe out there. If you got friends and families in the area, our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody out there. Lend a hand. Feel free to reach out to people. If you can help in any way. I'm sure there'll be some funds created and donated. Similar to how like J.J. Watt did with the, his funds that he helped out with, $26 million donated. I'm sure you'll see that. So make a donation there. Your Red Cross, other places out there as well. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody out there. Be safe. And we look forward to seeing you all at the top, everybody.